First at 9. This Thursday, the 18th of July 2024. Protecting the backbone. President announces plans to establish a national development bank to support the growth of MSMEs. With immediate effect, SDIG Nilantha Jayawardena sent on compulsory leave until disciplinary investigations related to Easter Sunday attacks are concluded. Tackling corruption. Justice Minister urges the Election Commission to enforce the new Election Expenses Act for the presidential polls. Propelling growth. Construction of Port Access Elevated Highway project to conclude by October.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Derana First at 9. I'm Tharindu Mahendra, joining you with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now, taking you through your top story this evening, President Ranil Wickremesinghe noted that strengthening micro, small and medium-scale enterprises is crucial for the country's economic progress and went on to announce plans for the establishment of a national development bank aimed at providing necessary capital to MSMEs. Meanwhile, under the initiative launched to provide comprehensive packages of financial facilities for MSMEs, 18 billion rupees will be disbursed by 15 participatory financial institutions, including licensed commercial banks and licensed specialized banks.
A comprehensive package of financial facilities aimed at revitalizing micro, small and medium-scale enterprises was introduced at the Presidential Secretariat under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe today.
Funds totaling 18 billion rupees have been allocated from Budget 2024 for this initiative. We expect to provide financial assistance to 2,000 MSMEs this year. We are carrying out this program through 15 state-owned and private sector banks. Loans are provided under two categories. Under the first category, loans of up to 15 million rupees will be provided for operational, micro, small and medium-scale enterprises. Under the other category, working capital loans of up to 5 million rupees will be provided for non-operational, micro, small and medium-scale enterprises.
We have had the opportunity to emerge from bankruptcy. Though we have come out of bankruptcy, we have yet to settle our debt. Following discussions in this regard, we have decided to resume the development of this sector. We have allocated 50 billion rupees and the program will be implemented accordingly. We are providing assistance to develop businesses, thereby allowing halted businesses to resume. Apart from this, we are yet to implement another proposal to establish a national development bank. A country's development requires capital and we are implementing programs for that purpose. These programs are implemented to increase foreign investments and develop large-scale businesses.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Now, the State Minister of Finance, Ranjit Siambalapitiya, has announced that the government will establish a national credit guarantee institution this year with the support of the Asian Development Bank. This initiative aims to provide assurance to entrepreneurs seeking loans. Speaking at a media briefing today, State Minister Siambalapitiya also mentioned that the government plans to raise the threshold for personal income tax, currently set at 100,000 rupees, once stable revenue targets are achieved. Our country lacked a credit guarantee institution. One of the main obstacles new entrepreneurs face is being unable to provide assurance to obtain a loan. Therefore, we will establish the National Credit Guarantee Institution in October of this year with the aid of the Asian Development Bank's 50 billion rupee loan. Entrepreneurs will be able to obtain the support of that institution to procure assurances to obtain loans.
දැන් යන වැඩපිළිවෙල එහෙම ඉදිරියට ගෙනිච්ච නම් IMF උත් එක්කම කවද විතරද අපිට බදු අඩු කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ
ශක්තිමත් ආර්ථිකයක් තියෙන රටක් වෙන්න.
In order to become a country with a strong economy, state revenue should be around 15% of the gross domestic product. This figure fell to 8.3%, which is why the country fell into crisis. However, now, state revenue is approaching 13% of the GDP. We intend to increase state revenue to the level it is supposed to be. We can can do so by increasing direct taxes and collecting taxes that were subject to evasion. After that, we will be able to reduce indirect taxes. Further, we intend to increase the threshold for being subject to income tax, which currently stands at 100,000 rupees. We are ready to provide concessions once we achieve stable state revenue. However, I cannot provide an exact timeline in which that will take place. When we began this process, the country's tax composition was 80% indirect taxes and 20% direct taxes. However, we have changed that. Now the composition is 70% indirect taxes and 30% direct taxes. Our goal is to achieve a tax composition of 40% indirect taxes and 60% direct taxes by 2025, in line with the developed nations of the world. When we achieve that goal, we will be able to implement a fairer tax policy.
ප්‍රචලිත කරන්න අපිට අවස්ථාවක් ලැබෙවි කියන.
රේගුවේ ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීම ගැන අපි ගොඩාක් කල් දැන් කතා කරනවා. ඒකේ මොනවාරි තියෙනවද දැන් මොනවාරි වෙනවද ඒකේ?
ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙනවා දිගටම රේගුවේ තාගේ අරමුදල ගැන.
There was a long-standing issue regarding the Customs Reward Fund. 70% of the fund went to customs officials, while the government only received 30% of the proceeds. Following negotiations with customs officials, I was able to increase the government's share of the fund to 50%. It only remains for this to be codified in law.
දැන් අපි ඒක නීතියක් කරන්න විතරයි අවශ්‍ය.
ඊ දවසේදී හර්ෂද සිල්වා මන්ත්‍රීතුමා ණය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කරන ක්‍රියාවලිය සම්පූර්ණ කළ නැහැ කියලා චෝදනාවක් ඉදිරිපත් කළ තිබෑ.
තාම අපිට තියෙනවා පෞද්ගලික ණය හිමියන්ගේ කටයුතු ටික නිමා කරගන්න.
It is true that we are yet to reach agreements with private creditors. However, we have completed the most difficult aspects of the restructuring process, such as restructuring bilateral and domestic debt. This is not a simple matter. Previously, foreign debt repayments accounted for over 9% of the country's gross domestic product. We are trying to keep this figure at around 4.9% of the GDP. Total debt repayments accounted for over 36% of the GDP. We are trying to reduce that down to 13% of the GDP. We are making progress step by step.
ඒ නිසා පියවරෙන් පියවර අපි යනවා.
Horizon Campus 2024 intake. Register now.
Now, Minister of Mass Media, Transport and Highways, Dr. Bandula Gunawardena says the Port Access Elevated Highway project will supplement the ongoing efforts to develop the Port of Colombo into one of the most developed ports in the world. Addressing the media during an inspection tour of the project, the Highways Minister said the project will provide numerous benefits for the Sri Lankan economy in the long run.
The Port Access Elevated Highway project was commenced in 2019 to alleviate traffic congestion in the densely populated areas of Colombo, improve last-mile connectivity from the country's expressway network to the international port in Colombo, provide better logistics services for freight operations, and to facilitate regional trade. The project includes the construction of an elevated tall highway spanning approximately 5.3 kilometers between the new Canary Bridge and Golf Face in central Colombo, which aims to provide a direct link to the city centre and the port from the Colombo-Kotanayak Expressway via the new Canary Bridge. The Port Access Highway project was originally scheduled to be concluded in 2023. However, delays occurred due to the fallout of the economic crisis in the country last year. Against this backdrop, Minister of Transport, Highways and Mass Media, Bandula Gunawardena, engaged in a tour today to inspect the current status of the project construction, which is expected to be concluded by October this year.
70% of the construction activities of this project are carried out by Sri Lankan engineers and workers. This project will have a positive impact on the country's economic indicators in the future. The Port Access Elevated Highway project will supplement the development that is associated with the Colombo port in becoming one of the most developed ports in the world. Balavege Mano Ganeshan criticised the proposal to identify areas occupied by plantation workers on state-owned plantation lands and to formally designate these areas as new settlement villages, which recently acquired approval of the Cabinet of Ministers. He went on to say that he disagrees with simply naming these lands where state workers live as settlement villages in order to cover up the initiatives which the government failed to implement.
The Cabinet of Ministers recently approved a proposal presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to identify areas occupied by plantation workers on state-owned plantation lands managed by the State Plantation Corporation and regional plantation companies, and to draft legislation to formally designate these areas as new settlement villages. A special discussion in this regard was convened at the Presidential Secretariat under the patronage of President Wickremesinghe yesterday. The discussion was attended by Minister of Water Supply and Estate Infrastructure Development Jeevan Thondaman and parliamentarians Mano Ganeshan, Palanidhi Gambaran and Vadivel Suresh. Parliamentarian Mano Ganeshan emphasised the crucial need to secure land rights for current plantation dwellers under this initiative and submitted a corresponding proposal to the President. President Wickremesinghe underscored the government's ongoing commitment to implementing programs that provide freehold land and housing rights to residents of villages, towns and plantations. The President further recommended initiating the legislative process by consulting regional plantation companies and went on to propose the formation of a committee comprising parliamentarians representing plantation communities and relevant stakeholders to oversee the process. However, parliamentarians of the Tamil Progressive Alliance called for a media briefing today and noted that they do not agree with the proposal in question.
We made no promise. We merely expressed our ideas. We are happy about attending the discussion as we were able to point out what they are doing is wrong. We are straightforward people. We directly said that what they are doing is wrong. The estate workers' wage issue is being dragged out. The President in Parliament promised to provide lands of 10 purchases each to estate workers. He also said 4 billion rupees have been allocated for the respective initiatives. However, none of these initiatives were implemented. Now they are saying they will name lands where estate workers live as settlement villages to justify what they are doing. What is this joke? We are people with self-respect and we disagreed with this.
Now, Minister of Justice Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa has notified the Election Commission to enforce the Election Expenses Regulation Act No. 3 of 2023 for the forthcoming presidential election. Speaking to Ada Derana, the minister said a meeting will be held between officials of the Election Commission, the Police and the Bribery Commission to discuss the enforceability of this act in the future.
Highlighting flaws and corruption in the country's electoral system, the Justice Ministry presented a cabinet paper in the year 2022 to draft a law that contains provisions to control election campaign-related expenditures incurred by political parties. Following cabinet approval, the bill titled Regulation of Election Expenditure was drafted and presented to Parliament for approval.
If you look at the system which is prevailing, people who commit frauds, cheating, taking bribes, all kind of corruptions, when it comes to the election, they spend a part of corrupted money, ill-gotten money, and they get the highest preferential votes. That is how the people have been elected. One of the reasons is, in this corrupted electoral system, there are a lot of underworld people, maybe the people with ill-gotten money. They sponsor politicians with the expectation of getting some other advantages after they have been elected. Like in other developed democratic countries, there is no any regulatory process with regard to the expenditure of candidates. That is why I enacted the number 3 of 2023 Electoral Expenditure Regulatory Bill.
The long title states that the bill aims to regulate the expenditure incurred by recognized political parties, independent groups and candidates at every election conducted under the Local Authorities Election Ordinance, the Provincial Council Elections Act No. 2 of 1988, the Parliamentary Elections Act No. 1 of 1981 and the Presidential Elections Act No. 15 of 1981. On the 19th of January last year, against a backdrop of discussions on holding the local government elections, the bill was passed in Parliament with a majority of 61 votes. Even though steps were taken to include the Regulation of Election Expenditure Act No. 3 of 2023 in Sri Lankan law books, the Election Commission could not enforce its provisions as the local government election was not held last year, citing financial difficulties during a time in which the country was trying to recover from a deep economic crisis. However, the government announced that the presidential election, which is crucial in determining who the country's head of state will be for the next 5 years, will be held towards the end of this year between the 17th of September and the 16th of October. On Tuesday, Chairman of the Election Commission RMAL Ratnayaka announced that the date for the election will be announced before the end of this month. Further, the Chairman of the Election Commission assured that nothing will affect the presidential election this year except for a court order preventing the election. Against this backdrop, Minister of Justice Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa has notified the Election Commission via letter to enforce the Election Expenses Regulation Act No. 3 of 2023 for the forthcoming presidential election. Speaking to Ada Derana on this matter, Dr. Rajapaksa emphasized that the Election Expenses Regulation Act aims to transform the election culture and establish the rule of law.
Once nominations are accepted, within 5 days, Election Commission is bound to make a pronouncement how much could be spent by every candidate. After the conclusion of election, within 21 days, all the candidates shall tender their statements together with an affidavit stating that how much of money that they have spent for the election and also the sources through which that they have got the money. And if they have spent the money through illegal sources like that public funds, money collected from overseas, various other external factors, then other monies which they cannot explain from where that they got the money, then they are committing an offence. Once it is established, once that they give their statement, it has to be displayed for the public awareness. Then anybody can go and check that on the notice of the Election Commission or the district electoral officer. Then any person, any citizen can make complaints. They can file even in the election petition in courts asking to set aside or cost the election of such members. Not only that, court is empowered even to impose by way of punishment, imprisonment sentence and fines. If the contents of the affidavits are false, then it is perjury. Then they are liable to be punished for perjury also. I have already informed the Election Commission to call for a meeting together with all the party secretaries and relevant other authorities such as the police, bribery commission. Then we can discuss.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says that he plans to construct a multi-purpose park in every divisional secretariat across the country, each with a digital training centre to introduce teenagers and school children to the digital world. He made those remarks at the 332nd edition of the Sakpila program in Kalutara.
The 332nd edition of the Sakpala program was held at Halkandavila Mahavidyalaya in Kalutara under the patronage of opposition leader Sajith Premadasa.
We must overcome our current bankruptcy. By the end of this year, we will transform all 10,096 schools nationwide into smart schools. We will also construct a multi-purpose park in every divisional secretariat. Additionally, digital training centres will be established in each multi-purpose park, paving the way for teenagers and school children to enter the digital world. We cannot resolve the country's issue by relying solely on state revenue and expenditure. We must utilize new technologies and move forward with a positive mindset.
ධනාත්මක මානසිකත්වයකින් අපි මේ ගමන ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නට ඕන.
With that, let's take a look at some views expressed in the political arena.
Yesterday we received information and were inquired whether the Gazette notifying the dissolution of Parliament has been prepared in order to be able to dissolve Parliament immediately if it does not support the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution. This decision could potentially alter the political landscape by advancing the general election ahead of the presidential election.
වෙච්ච වැරද්දක් නිවැරදි කිරීමක් තියෙන්නේ. ඒක බොහෝ දුරට ඉතින් ඡන්දෙන් පස්සේ වුණත් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඊළඟ පාර්ලිමේන්තු වාර කිසියකකට ඒක සම්බන්ධව දින දාලත් නැහැ, ගැසට් කරන්නෙත් නැහැ. ඒක බොහොම පෞකාලික සිද්ධ වෙයි.
මැතිවරණ කොමිසමේ කිසිම දෝෂයක් නැහැ.
There is nothing wrong with the Election Commission. It has been empowered by the 19th Amendment. They will announce the election date at the appropriate time. Why doubt it when the Justice Minister has confirmed the election will proceed? Who could possibly stop it?
කාටද ඒක නවත්තන්න පුළුවන්?
ඡන්දයක් තියන්න හොඳ වාතාවරණයක් අද රටේ තියෙනවා. ආර්ථික තත්ත්වෙමුත් අද රට හොඳ යහපත් අතර හැරෙමින් පවතිනවා. එහෙම වෙලාවක ඡන්ද කල් දාන්න උත්සාහ කරන්න මම හිතේ රජයට ජනාධිපතිතුමාට ඕනකමක් තියෙයි කියලා මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ.
රනිල්ට අපි මතක් කරන්න කැමතියි.
We would like to remind Ranil Wickremesinghe that in their effort to create confusion within the country, they are the ones who have become confused. The reason for this confusion is the emergence of populist leadership.
ව්‍යාකූලත්වයට පත්වීම සාමාන්‍යයි කියලා මතක් කරන්න කැමතියි.
The JVP's only strengths are brutality and persuasive rhetoric. They formed a government with Chandrika Bandaranaike and appointed 4 cabinet ministers. They claim they would build 10,000 reservoirs. Have they ever built one reservoir? The UNP is the only party whose candidate accepted the challenge.
The government is reducing the prices of goods in preparation for the upcoming election. Sajith Premadasa is widely regarded as the front-runner to win the upcoming election, regardless of who the other candidates might be.
Star dishwasher Dali Hell Indul Pahasuwen Sede Star dishwasher magic tub එක
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Welcome back. Now, Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police Nilantha Jayawardena has been sent on compulsory leave with immediate effect. According to the National Police Commission, he is sent on compulsory leave until the disciplinary investigation against him pertaining to the Easter Sunday terror attacks is concluded. On the 12th of January last year, the Supreme Court stated that the former President Maithripala Sirisena, Senior DIG Nilantha Jayawardena, who was the then Chief of State Intelligence Service, and 3 other former defence chiefs committed a breach of fundamental rights by failing to prevent the Easter Sunday terrorist attack despite receiving credible information of an imminent attack. The Supreme Court ordered the former State Intelligence Chief Nilantha Jayawardena to pay 75 million rupees as compensation to the victims of the attacks. Omani authorities have reported that 9 members of the 16-member crew from the oil tanker Prestige Falcon have been rescued after the vessel capsized off the coast of Oman on Monday. 1 crew member has been found deceased. Search and rescue operations are ongoing to locate the 6 remaining crew members. However, authorities have noted that adverse sea conditions are currently hampering these efforts.
The oil tanker capsized 25 nautical miles southeast of the Ras Madraka Peninsula last Monday while en route to the port of Aden in Yemen. The crew of the Prestige Falcon consisted of 13 Indian nationals and 3 Sri Lankans. According to foreign media reports, 8 Indians and 1 Sri Lankan from the Prestige Falcon were located by Indian Navy vessel INS Tej in the Arabian Sea. Oman's Maritime Security Centre later confirmed that 9 crew members have been rescued alive, with 1 crew member found deceased. India and Oman continue their search for the remaining crew amidst challenging weather conditions, including rough seas and high winds.
Now, in your business news, Sri Lanka's Colombo-based think tank Advocata Institute urges the government to introduce the state-owned enterprises holding company bill in Parliament before the elections. Speaking at a media briefing, Chief Executive Officer Dhananath Fernando emphasised that implementing the SOE holding company bill would establish a better governance structure for appointing suitable members to the boards of directors of SOEs.
When political parties reaching out to us, we are requesting them to add it to their manifestos, even post-election, whoever who comes to power, and pretty much they agree because it's quite obvious that the state-owned enterprises will be a problem even when they come to power. So at least to add to the manifestos. For the government, our kind request is whatever the transactions that we are at this moment which has come through the process, please get it through and bring the SOE holding company bill to the parliament because that has a people's mandate to bring the bill to set up the state-owned holding company so that it brings the governance structure on appointing separate holding company, and the holding company has the powers to appoint directors for those respective state enterprises. At least bring the governance at this moment so then we have the framework which cannot be reversed because the time is running, the clock is ticking very fast because after the presidential election, general election, everything changes. And then most of the time when there's an electoral period, most of these institutions do not work well because they don't have directions, and basically that's where this starts drifting from the operations. Third is at least release the annual report because we are struggling to get the data.
Is there something that can be done for the president not to take the finance ministership and have an independent finance minister who the president can actually question?
In the constitution, I think we need to have a full-time finance minister. It has to provide in the constitution in my view because the job of the finance minister is anyway very, very unpopular. You have to increase the revenue, that you have to increase the taxes, you have to cut down the expenditure. That is also not popular. And when there's a president, of course the president needs popularity to be in politics. So there's a conflicting role when the president is a finance minister. I think ideal way is to having that provisions in the constitution that the finance minister have a full-time finance minister, then the accountability would be and the transparency would be better.
The Colombo Bourse closed in red today, dragged down by losses in communication services stocks. The benchmark all-share index slipped 0.52% to settle at 11,766.45 points, falling for the third consecutive session. Trading volume on the ASPI fell to 21.3 million shares from 24 million in the previous session. Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka 20 dipped 0.51% to end at 3,439.46 points. Market turnover, meanwhile, fell to 1.13 billion rupees from 1.25 billion rupees in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while the banking sector came in second. Foreign investors were net buyers, purchasing stocks worth 545.5 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading shares worth 1.04 billion rupees. And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. We'll join you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you and have a good night.